Good morning, class. My name is Andrew. I am currently in Huntington, West Virginia, and have thoroughly enjoyed seeing all of your reports through the class in this discussion. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the person that I did my book report on. His name is William Wallace. He is not Braveheart, but he was a faithful servant of the Lord and was an incredible encouragement to me. So I gravitated towards Bill because I currently serve in the medical field as a nurse and also have some incredible relationships with people from China. So it kind of doubled down on my interest in his faithfulness in serving there, what life was like for him, both in the medical field and in the specific location of China. So Bill was originally from Knoxville. He grew up there, went to medical school, and did his surgical residency all in Knoxville. And during his surgical residency, actually wrote to the Foreign Mission Board expressing his interest to serve overseas, his life commitment. All this coming after what the book describes as a rather mundane call to missions. He was actually a gifted machinist and was tinkering with motors in his garage. Felt this conviction from the Lord, and at that point decided to spend his life of service as a medical missionary overseas. So after all that, he writes to the Foreign Mission Board. Little does he know, at the same time, there was a hospital director serving at a Baptist hospital in China who had written back to the Foreign Mission Board explaining how badly they needed a surgeon. Bill was prepared to go anywhere, and this hospital opening was the perfect orchestration from the Lord to get him immediately plugged in and serving people overseas. So Bill had taken this to his church, and his church actually decided to send him with an entire year's worth of funding solely from his own church. It was just an incredible display of faithfulness on their part, and showed that their heart for mission had been cultivated well, that they saw the value in what Bill was going to do, and that he was giving up a life of prestige and comfort and wealth, even here in the States as a gifted physician, to go spend his life in China. So Bill is actually described as a pleasantly stubborn individual. As most physicians that we encounter, he is very confident in his decision making, often rubbing people the wrong way, taking duties that he had strong conviction for, and very openly saying no to duties that he did not care for. The book is very clear that he not only was not necessarily gifted at administrative things, but also didn't care for them. So as the director of the hospital in Wuchao was planning on stepping down, Bill had actually said no, which delayed this man's retirement for an entire year. Later, it's confessed that Bill did that so he may have not lost a friend during his tenure in China, but in the same turn, he did not care for the administrative responsibilities that came with running a hospital. But Bill actually served through two major conflicts in China. He served through conflict with the Japanese and served through conflict with the Nationalist Party of China as they were attempting to seize control of the country. So through both of those periods of conflict, Bill remained. There were several other missionary families that he was serving with that, for the sake of their family, decided to come back to the States. But Bill, as a single man, and with full conviction that conflict is not a time when people need to lose their surgeon, stayed and remained through both of these major conflicts. He performed countless surgeries, functioned as effectively a lone surgeon, so he was handling anything that came through his doors. He may have not have known how to do everything, but he also realized that he was the most capable of doing anything for people. So he was doing any surgery you can think of, as unfortunately the people around him were facing bombings and attacks from several incoming foes, and he remained through all of these things. Through one of the more perilous times of Bill's life and service, the hospital actually became mobile. So the hospital building itself in Wuchao was actually bombed, rendered useless, and the people, though, resolved that much like the church, the hospital is not restricted to a building. They took the entity of the hospital through their carrying spirits and through whatever supplies they could fit on a boat, and actually put the hospital on a riverboat that floated between Wuchao and Canton and served people up and down the river, often retreating from conflict that was incoming, sometimes finding themselves right in the middle of it. The Lord was incredibly gracious here, and they actually only lost one of their hospital staff through their time on the river, which was a little over a year. So after that, they returned to Wuchao, reestablished the hospital, which would eventually be known as the Life of China, which is an incredible title for some place that you're serving to be considered as locals, as a life-giving place. So that was an incredible encouragement for me. Another encouragement was that Bill pursued excellence in how he served. During his furloughs in the States, he was actually scheduling classes and conferences and further rotations that he could grow as a physician in the way that he served people in China. Bill was not inherently a gifted teacher. He did teach occasionally and address congregations, but for the vast majority, he lived his life through that of love, through displaying Christ to their people. And he is actually regarded as, and this came from one of the nurses that he worked with, he was regarded as one who took on the entire Chinese portion. And the challenge there that was effectively screaming at me was whomever we end up serving, whether stateside or overseas, we need to be fully willing to take on the exact portion that they are given. So Bill remained through these major conflicts. He lived as they did, not as an outsider, but eventually taking on Wuchao as his home, the people there as his own people, being fully invested there and fully committed to the well-being of the people that he served. When he came home, he was, in fact, not home. When he came back to the States, it was purposeful. It was somewhere where he actually longed to be back in China with the families that he had formed relationships there. Bill didn't ever have a family of his own. So what that looked like for him was he actually took in children that were either orphaned or needed constant medical care. Along with the hospital staff, they kind of adopted these several children, and Bill loved them and was a fatherly figure to them. He acted as the father to several of the nurses who were married during his time in the hospital. Their fathers had either already passed away or had been killed in war. So Bill was asked to step in as father to the bride in these wedding ceremonies. It just speaks volumes to what they thought of him and his leadership and his character and his representation of Christ. He may have not been a pastoral theological teacher, but when you're inserted into situations where people are losing family members in the midst of massive suffering, you are gifted with incredible opportunities to share the gospel. And that's how Bill conducted the vast majority of his ministry. It was holding either suffering children, dying children in his arms, and explaining the glories of the gospel to the parents, explaining why the world needed redemption and why the world needed a savior. So just encouraged by that as well, that he was taking these what were daily opportunities for him and turning them into opportunities to share the gospel. So Bill faced these two conflicts. He survived the conflicts with the Japanese, with the Nationalist Party. They were much more intent on expunging all Western influence out of China. So he was eventually taken captive on charges of espionage by the Nationalist Party, put in an internment camp, denied food, worked hard, and eventually was just berated to death in this internment camp. The Nationalist Party actually tried to make it look like he hung himself in prison, but the medical staff that was invited to identify his body and to be informed that he was in fact dead took note of the physical manifestations that would come from a hanging death, and they were not present. So they know that he was killed in that internment camp. So Bill provided incredible examples of being fully invested to the people that he served, of excellence in service, and truly showed compassion paired with opportunity for the gospel. So I aspire to serve people in that way and to love people as Bill did. Thanks.